story. Chapter 1. The Homecoming. Scott McConnell strode through Tokyo International Airport, his phone pressed to his ear as he closed another multi-million-dollar deal. His voice carried the authority of someone who commanded respect, not just demanded it. "Listen, Tanaka-san, I appreciate your position, but this deal needs to close now. My terms are final." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Excellent choice. My team will send over the paperwork within the hour." He ended the call, satisfaction coursing through him. 2 weeks in Tokyo had yielded 3 major contracts, each worth more than most people would see in a lifetime. Scott had built his empire from nothing, and he protected it with the same intensity with which he'd created it. The 13-hour flight gave him time to review the contracts and plan his next moves. He was a man who left nothing to chance, every decision calculated and precise. His mind drifted to his family, his wife Carrie and their daughter Josefina. Despite his ruthless business persona, they were the center of his world. He'd missed Josefina's soccer game, but he'd make it up to her with the gifts he'd bought in Tokyo. His driver waited at JFK, holding a sign with McConnell printed in bold letters. Scott's Italian leather shoes clicked against the terminal floor as he approached. "Home, James," he said, sliding into the back seat of the black Mercedes. He loosened his tie, allowing himself to relax slightly. The deal was done, and he was heading home to his family. The car pulled up to his mansion in the suburbs, a testament to his success. Scott grabbed his briefcase and the shopping bags full of presents, anticipating Josefina's excitement. But as he approached the front door, something felt off. The house was too quiet, too still. He inserted his key and pushed the door open. "Carrie? Josefina?" His voice echoed through the empty foyer. No response. No running footsteps, no excited squeals from his daughter, no warm welcome from his wife. Then he heard it, muffled sobbing from upstairs. His instincts kicked in, and he took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding not from exertion but from a primal fear he'd never experienced in any boardroom. The sound led him to Josefina's room. He found his 10-year-old daughter curled up on her bed, clutching papers to her chest, her small frame shaking with sobs. Papers were scattered across her pink bedspread, some having fluttered to the floor. "Sweetheart," Scott said softly, stepping into the room. Josefina's head snapped up, her eyes wide with disbelief and something else. "Fear? Dad's alive!" she screamed, hurling the papers at him. They scattered in the air like leaves in a storm. "You're alive?" Scott froze, his mind struggling to process her words. "Of course I'm alive, Princess. Why wouldn't I be?" "Mom said," Josefina hiccuped through her tears, "Mom said you died in the plane crash. But these papers," she pointed at the documents littering her room. "You signed away your rights to us last week. Uncle Pete is adopting us tomorrow. Everyone's going to be there. Grandma, Grandpa, Uncle James." Scott's blood turned to ice in his veins. He snatched up one of the papers, his eyes scanning the legal document. There it was, his signature, perfectly forged, on adoption papers. Pete Thompson, his supposed divorce lawyer, was listed as the adopting parent. "What do you mean, everyone's going to be there?" Scott's voice was deadly quiet. "The adoption ceremony," Josefina hiccuped. "Mom said all our family would be there to support us. Your parents, your brother." Scott pulled out his phone, his fingers flying over the keypad as he dialed his mother's number. Each ring felt like an eternity. "Hello?" His mother's voice was thick with emotion. "Mom, it's Scott." A sharp gasp, followed by silence. Then, "Scott? But that's impossible. They told us, the plane crash." "Mom, I'm alive. I'm standing in my house right now with Josefina. What exactly were you told?" His mother began to sob. "Carrie called us 2 weeks ago. She said your plane went down over the Pacific. There was a memorial service. We've been grieving, Scott." Scott's free hand clenched into a fist, his knuckles white. "Put Dad on the phone." A shuffling sound, then his father's gruff voice. "Who is this? If this is some sick joke." "Dad, it's me. I'm alive. Carrie lied to everyone. I never got on that plane. I had to stay in Tokyo an extra day for an emergency meeting. She's been planning something." There are adoption papers here with my forged signature. Silence on the other end. Then, son. His father's voice broke, something Scott had never heard before. We'll be there in 30 minutes. Scott ended the call and turned back to Josefina, who was watching him with wide, tear-filled eyes. He sat on the edge of her bed and pulled her into his arms. She clung to him like she used to when she was younger, before he'd started spending so much time at the office. Listen to me, princess, he said, his voice gentle but firm. I'm alive, and I'm not going anywhere. I don't know what's going on yet, but I promise you, I'm going to fix this. No one is going to take you away from me. Mom said you abandoned us, Josefina whispered against his chest. She said you signed the papers because you didn't want us anymore. Something dark and dangerous unfurled in Scott's chest. The businessman who could destroy competitors without remorse, who could reduce CEOs to stammering messes in boardrooms, who had built an empire through sheer will and cunning. That man emerged now, but with a new purpose. Your mother lied, he said simply, and she's going to regret that very, very much. He held his daughter while she cried, his mind already working through scenarios, planning his next moves. Someone had tried to steal his life, his daughter, had manipulated his family and broken their hearts. They had tried to erase him. Scott McConnell had built his reputation on being fair but ruthless when crossed. He gave second chances in business, but never third ones. And he never, ever forgave betrayal. He pulled back slightly to look at Josefina. Where is your mother now? She left this morning. Said she had meetings about the adoption. Scott nodded, pulling out his phone again. He dialed his sister's number. Kirsten was a shark in the courtroom, and he needed a shark right now. Scott. Kirsten answered on the first ring. What's going on? Mom just called me hysterical, saying you're alive. I need you at my house. Now. Bring everything you need to stop an adoption and begin divorce proceedings. And Kirsten? Bring that file you kept on Carrie. His sister didn't hesitate. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Scott ended the call and looked down at his daughter again. She had stopped crying and was watching him with those big eyes that could always melt his heart. But not today. Today, his heart was ice. Are you hungry, princess? He asked, his voice softening only for her. We could order your favorite pizza while we wait for Grandma and Grandpa. Josefina nodded, managing a small smile. With extra cheese? Extra cheese, he confirmed. And while we wait, you're going to tell me everything that's happened in the last 2 weeks. Everything your mother said, everything she did, every person who visited. Can you do that for me? Another nod. That's my girl. He pulled out his phone one more time, this final call to a number he rarely used. Jack? It's Scott McConnell. Remember that favor you owe me? I'm calling it in. I need everything you can find on Carrie Day McConnell and Pete Thompson. And Jack? I mean everything. Scott held his daughter close as they waited for the others to arrive, his mind already formulating plans within plans. Someone had tried to destroy his life, steal his daughter, and break his family's heart. They were about to learn why crossing Scott McConnell was considered business suicide in New York's corporate world. The game had begun, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd left him alive to play it. Chapter 2. Unraveling the Web. Scott sat in his home office with Kirsten, the adoption papers spread across his mahogany desk. His parents had taken Josefina upstairs, trying to maintain some normalcy for her, while the adults dealt with the situation. This is meticulously planned, Kirsten said, examining the documents. The signature forgery is professional work. They weren't amateurs, Scott. She looked up at her brother, her eyes sharp. I need access to all your financial records. Scott unlocked his computer and pulled up his accounts. Everything's here. Kirsten's fingers flew across the keyboard, her face growing increasingly grim. Scott, she said after several minutes, when's the last time you checked your business accounts? I've been in Tokyo for 2 weeks, focused on the deals. My CFO handles the day-to-day. He moved around the desk to look at the screen. What is it? Look at these transactions. Kirsten pointed to a series of entries. Over the past 3 months, someone's been siphoning money through a complex series of transfers. They've taken millions. Scott's expression hardened. How much? Initial estimate? Around 15 million. They've been careful, breaking it into smaller amounts to avoid triggering alerts. She pulled up another screen. And look who's been authorizing these transfers. Pete Thompson, my divorce lawyer. Scott's voice was cold. The same Pete Thompson who's trying to adopt my daughter. There's more. Kirsten opened a folder on her laptop. Remember when you first married Carrie, and you asked me to look into her background? I kept monitoring her. She turned the screen toward Scott. These photos were taken last month. That's Carrie with Pete Thompson at the Ritz-Carlton. Scott studied the photos. His wife and his lawyer, looking very intimate over dinner. They're lovers. It gets worse. Kirsten pulled up more photos. Pete Thompson isn't his real name. It's Leroy Flowers. He changed it 5 years ago. He's been working this angle for a long time, Scott. Scott remembered introducing Carrie to Leroy at a charity gala 7 years ago. They'd been friends then, or so he thought. He'd trusted Leroy with his legal affairs, his family matters, even made him Josephina's godfather. I want everything frozen, Scott said. Every account, every asset. Lock it all down. Already done. Kirsten smiled grimly. I filed emergency injunctions the moment I saw the adoption papers. They can't touch anything without court approval now. Scott's phone buzzed. A text from Jack Hayden. Jack's got something. He's coming over. 20 minutes later, Jack sat in Scott's office, his tablet connected to the TV screen on the wall. They've been planning this for at least a year, he said, pulling up surveillance photos. Carrie hired a PI to dig up dirt on you 6 months ago, but you're clean. When that failed, they moved to Plan B. The plane crash story, Scott said. Exactly. They needed you out of the picture long enough to push through the adoption. Once that was done, Leroy would have legal rights to Josefina and access to her trust fund. Combined with the money they've already stolen, they'd be set for life. And my daughter? Scott's voice was dangerous. Based on the messages I intercepted, they planned to send her to boarding school in Switzerland. Get her out of the way. Scott stood, walking to the window. He thought about his marriage, about the moment he first met Carrie. She'd been beautiful, charming, seemingly perfect. He'd been so focused on building his empire that he'd missed the signs. Her constant complaints about money despite their wealthy lifestyle. Her subtle manipulation of his time with Josefina. Her insistence that he use Leroy for all their legal matters. I want them destroyed, he said quietly. Not just stopped. Destroyed. Scott, Kirsten began, but he cut her off. They tried to steal my daughter. They manipulated my family into believing I was dead. They planned to ship my child off to another country. He turned back to them, his eyes cold. This isn't just about money anymore. Jack cleared his throat. There's one more thing you should know. Leroy's got a pattern. He's done this before, though never on this scale. He finds wealthy clients, gains their trust, then helps their spouses take them for everything. He's careful, always operating just within the law. Until now, Kirsten added. Forgery, fraud, conspiracy. We've got him this time. Scott sat back down at his desk. I want a meeting with him tomorrow. Set it up. Are you sure that's wise? Kirsten asked. He doesn't know I'm alive yet. Let's keep it that way until the meeting. I want to see his face when I walk in. Scott turned to Jack. I need surveillance on Carrie. Move, call, person she meets. And I want to know who else is involved. Already on it. Jack stood. I'll have my team in place within the hour. After Jack left, Kirsten studied her brother. What are you planning? They tried to erase me, Kirsten. Now I'm going to erase them. He picked up one of the photos of Carrie and Leroy. But first, I'm going to take everything from them. Everything. Good, Kirsten said firmly. I've never trusted her. The way she came into your life. How quickly she pushed for marriage. I should have pushed harder to make you see it. No, Scott said. This is on me. I was blind because I wanted to be. Because it was easier to believe in the perfect wife and perfect life while I built my empire. He smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. I'm awake now. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Josefina stood there in her pajamas, looking small and vulnerable. Dad, can I sleep in your room tonight? I'm afraid you won't be here when I wake up. Scott's expression softened immediately. Of course, princess. He held out his arms, and she ran to him. I promise you, I'm not going anywhere. Kirsten watched them, then began gathering her files. I'll start the legal proceedings first thing in the morning. We'll need to move fast to counter whatever they have planned. Scott nodded, holding his daughter. Tomorrow, he said, we go to war. Chapter 3. The trap is set. The next morning, Scott sat in Leroy's office waiting room, dressed in his best suit. Kirsten sat beside him, her recorder hidden in her purse. They'd chosen the early morning meeting time deliberately. Leroy would be tired, less guarded. Mr. Thompson will see you now, his secretary announced. Scott stood, straightening his tie. Ready? Kirsten nodded. He's not expecting you. He thinks I'm here with a court officer about the adoption. They walked into Leroy's office. He was sitting behind his desk, examining papers, not bothering to look up. Kirsten, I thought I made it clear that the adoption proceedings are our... His voice trailed off as he finally looked up and saw Scott. The color drained from his face. Hello, Leroy, Scott said pleasantly. Or should I call you Pete? I'm never quite sure with men who change their names. Leroy's hand trembled as he reached for his phone. Scott moved faster, unplugging the device from the wall. Sit down, Scott commanded. We're going to have a chat about adoption papers, forged signatures, and stolen millions. I don't know what you're talking about, Leroy stammered. We all thought you were dead. The plane crash. Ah, yes, the crash. Scott sat down, looking completely at ease. Interesting story, especially since I never boarded that plane. But you knew that, didn't you? Just like you knew about the money being siphoned from my accounts. Just like you knew about the plans for my daughter. Leroy's eyes darted to the door. Kirsten stood in front of it, arms crossed. Don't bother, she said. The secretary's gone to get coffee. We have at least 15 minutes. Whatever you think you know, Leroy began, but Scott cut him off. I know everything. The affair with my wife. The fake identity. The other families you've destroyed. The offshore accounts where you've been hiding my money. Scott leaned forward. The only thing I don't know is why you thought you could get away with it. Leroy's demeanor changed suddenly, a smirk appearing on his face. Prove it. Prove any of it. Your wife will testify that you abandoned your family. The adoption papers are legally filed. The financial transactions are all properly authorized. You've got nothing. Scott smiled, and it was a terrifying expression. That's where you're wrong, old friend. While you and Carrie were playing house with my life, I was building a case. Meeting, phone call, transaction. I have it all. But here's your chance to save yourself. Tell me everything, and maybe I don't destroy you completely. You're bluffing, Leroy said, but there was fear in his eyes. Scott pulled out his phone and played a recording, Carrie's voice discussing the fake plane crash with Leroy. Then another, Leroy instructing someone about the forged signatures. Would you like to hear more? Scott asked. I have hours of material. Amazing what money can buy, isn't it? Private investigators, surveillance experts, forensic accountants. Leroy slumped in his chair. What do you want? Everything, Scott said simply. Detail of your plan. Person involved. Cent you stole. You're going to tell me everything, and Kirsten here is going to record it all. For the next hour, Leroy talked. He revealed how Carrie had approached him with the idea, how they'd planned each step, how they'd manipulated events and people. He confessed to the forgery, the fraud, everything. When he finished, Scott stood. Thank you for your cooperation. You'll be hearing from my lawyers soon. Oh, and Leroy? If you warn Carrie about this meeting, the recording goes straight to the Bar Association and the DA's office. Outside, Kirsten looked at her brother. That was almost too easy. He's a coward, Scott said. Men like him only act tough when they think they're winning. He checked his phone. Messages from Jack. We've got more. Jack's found the person Carrie hired to handle the dirty work. We need to move fast before they realize their plan has failed. What about Carrie? Let her keep thinking she's won. The longer she believes that, the more mistakes she'll make. Scott's phone buzzed again. That's the school. I need to pick up Josefina. Are you sure it's safe? Jack's team is watching her. Besides, Scott's expression hardened. They won't try anything now. Not when their plan is falling apart. As they walked to their cars, Scott thought about the look on Leroy's face when he realized his game was over. It was satisfying, but not enough. Not nearly enough. They had tried to take everything from him. His daughter, his money, his life. Now he would take everything from them. But first, he would make them watch as their perfect plan crumbled around them. The war had begun, and Scott McConnell never lost a war. Chapter 4. The Legal Chess Game. Kirsten Daniels strode into the courthouse, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The emergency hearing to halt the adoption proceedings was scheduled in 10 minutes, and she had every intention of destroying Leroy Flowers' career today. Scott sat in the front row of the courtroom, his presence commanding attention without effort. His eyes never left Leroy, who sat at the defense table trying to maintain his composure. The smug confidence from their earlier meeting had vanished, replaced by barely concealed panic. "All rise," the bailiff announced as Judge Martinez entered the courtroom. "Your Honor," Kirsten began, "we're here today to address a severe case of fraud and misrepresentation. I have evidence that Mr. Flowers, acting as counsel for Mrs. McConnell, has submitted adoption papers with forged signatures and false declarations." Leroy's attorney jumped up. "Your Honor, these are baseless accusations. Mr. McConnell was declared deceased, and the adoption proceeding were based on lies," Kirsten interrupted, pulling out a stack of documents. "I have here Mr. McConnell's travel records, showing he never boarded the supposedly crashed plane. I also have forensic evidence proving the signatures on the adoption papers were forged." Judge Martinez examined the documents carefully. "Mr. Flowers, these are serious allegations." "Your Honor," Leroy's attorney argued, "even if Mr. McConnell is alive, the adoption papers were properly filed and—" "Properly filed?" Kirsten's voice dripped with contempt. "I have evidence that Mr. Flowers has been embezzling millions from my client's accounts while orchestrating this fraud. This isn't a simple adoption case. It's part of a larger criminal conspiracy." The judge's expression darkened. "Mr. Flowers, are you prepared to address these allegations?" Before Leroy could respond, the courtroom doors opened. Samuel Flowers, Leroy's older brother and fellow judge, entered. "Your Honor, I need to recuse myself from any involvement in this case due to conflict of interest. However, I feel compelled to inform the court that I have evidence supporting Ms. Daniels' claims." Leroy's face went white. His own brother was turning against him. The judge reviewed the new evidence. "This court finds sufficient cause to halt all adoption proceedings immediately. Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into Mr. Flowers' conduct and freezing all associated assets pending review." Scott watched as Leroy's world began to crumble. He'd lost his first battle, and Scott was just getting started. Outside the courtroom, Kirsten confronted Samuel. "Why did you come forward?" Samuel looked tired, years older than his age. "Because my brother crossed a line. I've watched him bend rules for years, but this, trying to steal a man's child? I couldn't stay silent." Scott approached them. "Judge Flowers, I appreciate your honesty. But understand this. If I find out you knew about this plan beforehand, you'll face the same consequences as your brother." Samuel met Scott's gaze. "I understand, Mr. McConnell, and for what it's worth, I'm sorry for my brother's actions." Scott's phone buzzed, a message from Jack. He opened it to find photos of Carrie meeting with various people, looking increasingly desperate as her accounts remained frozen. "Kirsten," Scott said, "initiate the next phase. I want every unethical case Leroy ever handled reopened. Contact his former clients. Build a pattern of corruption so complete that the Bar Association has no choice but to act." "Already on it," Kirsten replied. "His previous victims are coming forward. Apparently, your case gave them courage." Scott nodded, his expression hard. "And Carrie? Her assets are frozen. She tried to access your accounts this morning but couldn't. She's been calling her friends for loans, but word of her deception has spread. No one's taking her calls." Scott checked his watch. "I need to pick up Josefina from school. Have the security team sweep the house again. I don't want any surprises." As Scott drove to his daughter's school, he thought about how quickly things had changed. Just days ago, he'd been focused on business deals in Tokyo. Now he was waging war against his wife and former friend. Josefina was waiting at the school entrance, her face lighting up when she saw him. She ran to the car, clutching her backpack. "Dad, you're really here." "Of course I am, princess. I promised, didn't I?" He helped her with her seatbelt. "How about ice cream?" At the ice cream parlor, Scott watched his daughter devour a chocolate sundae. She seemed happier, more relaxed than she'd been since his return. "Dad?" she asked, pushing her spoon around the bowl. "Is Mom coming back?" Scott considered his words carefully. "No, princess. Your mother made some very bad choices. She tried to hurt our family. Because she doesn't love us?" "She loves herself more than anything else," Scott replied honestly. "But that's her loss. You and we're going to be fine." His phone buzzed again. Another message from Jack. The private investigator had uncovered more evidence of Carrie and Leroy's plan. They'd been setting this up for over a year, manipulating events and people with calculated precision. "Mr. McConnell?" A voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to see one of Carrie's friends, Sarah, standing awkwardly by their table. "Sarah," he acknowledged coldly. I need to tell you something. Carrie tried to involve me in her plan. She wanted me to testify that you were abusive, to help with the adoption case. I refused, but I should have warned you." Scott's expression remained neutral, but his eyes turned to ice. "Thank you for telling me. I trust you'll be willing to make a formal statement." Sarah nodded quickly and hurried away. "Dad," Josefina asked, "why did Mom want people to lie about you?" "Because sometimes people think lies will get them what they want. But the truth always comes out, princess. Always." Back at his office later that evening, Scott reviewed the day's developments with his team. The evidence against Leroy was mounting, and Carrie's carefully constructed social life was unraveling. "The Bar Association has scheduled an emergency hearing," Kirsten reported. "They're taking the evidence very seriously." "Good," Scott replied. "And the financial tracking?" "We've traced most of the stolen money. They tried to hide it through a series of offshore accounts, but we've got them. The forensic accountants are building an airtight case." Scott leaned back in his chair. "Make sure every transaction is documented. I want them to feel completely trapped before we move in for the kill." "Scott," Kirsten hesitated. "Carrie's been trying to contact Josefina through her school friends' parents." Scott's expression darkened. "Have our security team updated the school's protocols. No one except approved contacts goes near my daughter." The intercom buzzed. "Mr. McConnell?" "Mrs. McConnell is here demanding to see you." Scott shared a look with Kirsten. "Perfect timing. Let's show her exactly what she's up against." The war had moved to its next phase, and Scott McConnell was just getting started. Chapter 5. The Fallout. The Bar Association conference room buzzed with tension as Leroy Flowers faced the disciplinary board. Scott sat in the back, watching his former friend squirm under the harsh fluorescent lights. "Mr. Flowers," the board chairman began, "the evidence against you is overwhelming. Forged documents, misappropriation of client funds, conspiracy to commit fraud." Leroy's hands trembled as he gripped the podium. "I can explain." "Explain this," another board member interrupted, holding up a stack of papers. 7 separate cases where you helped spouses defraud their partners. A pattern of unethical behavior spanning years. Scott observed as Leroy's professional life crumbled. The board didn't need long to reach their decision. "Effective immediately, your license to practice law is suspended pending a full investigation," the chairman announced. "Given the severity of the allegations, we're recommending permanent disbarment." Leroy spun around, his eyes finding Scott. "You did this. I can give back the money. We can make a deal." Scott stood, straightening his tie. "A deal? Like the deal you made with my wife to steal my daughter?" "Please," Leroy begged, his voice breaking. "My career, my life. Should have thought about that before you tried to destroy mine." Scott turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and Leroy? This is just the beginning." Outside, Jack waited with new information. "Boss, we found something interesting about Carrie's recent movements." They walked to Scott's car while Jack explained. "She's been liquidating her personal assets, trying to move money around since we froze the main accounts. But here's the interesting part. She's been meeting with some questionable characters." "Define questionable." The kind that make problems disappear for the right price. Jack handed over a file. She's desperate, Scott. Desperate people make mistakes. Scott reviewed the surveillance photos. Keep watching her. I want to know every move she makes, every person she talks to. There's more, Jack added. Remember that private investigator she hired to dig up dirt on you? He talked. Turns out they weren't just looking for embarrassing secrets. They were looking for ways to make you disappear permanently. Scott's expression hardened. They planned to kill me? The PI backed out when he realized what they wanted. That's when they moved to Plan B, the fake plane crash. Scott's phone rang, Carrie's number. He answered on speaker. Scott, please. Her voice wavered. Everything's falling apart. I can't access any of my accounts. My credit cards are declined everywhere. You need? Scott's voice was arctic. Like I needed to know my wife and best friend were planning my death? Silence on the other end. Then, that's not. I never. Save your lies, Carrie. How does it feel to be helpless? To watch everything slip away? Because I'm just getting started. You can't do this to me. I'm still Josefina's mother. A mother who tried to convince our daughter I was dead. Who planned to ship her off to boarding school so you could enjoy your new life with Leroy. How's that working out for you, by the way? I'll tell everyone what you're doing, Carrie threatened. Your investors, your business partners. Scott laughed, but there was no humor in it. Go ahead. Tell them how you forged documents, stole millions, and conspired to have me killed. I'm sure they'll be very sympathetic. He ended the call and turned to Jack. Find out who else is involved in their plan. Every single person who helped them, no matter how small their role. I want them all to pay. Chapter 6. The Gathering Storm. Scott's empire struck back with precision. His media contacts ran stories about Leroy's misconduct, each revelation carefully timed for maximum impact. Carrie's social circle disintegrated as evidence of her deception spread. In his office, Scott reviewed the latest developments with his team. The DA's office is building a criminal case, Kirsten reported. They're particularly interested in the financial fraud aspects. What about the hitman angle? Scott asked. We've identified him, Jack interjected. Small-time criminal named Marcus Reed. He's willing to testify about their plans in exchange for leniency. Scott nodded. Make the deal. I want everything on record. His intercom buzzed. Mr. McConnell? Judge Samuel Flowers is here to see you. Send him in. Samuel entered, looking haggard. Mr. McConnell, I'm here about my brother. Have a seat, Judge Flowers. How's Leroy enjoying unemployment? He's struggling. The legal community has blacklisted him. His reputation is destroyed. Good. Samuel leaned forward. I understand your anger, but he's still my brother. He's talking about a plea deal. Let me be very clear, Scott interrupted. Your brother conspired to have me killed, tried to steal my daughter, and helped embezzle millions from my company. The fact that you're here trying to help him makes me question your judgment. I'm not. You are. And let me tell you something, Judge Flowers. If I find out you helped them in any way, even by turning a blind eye, you'll face the same consequences as your brother. Your reputation, your career, your life. I'll take it all. Is that a threat, Mr. McConnell? It's a promise. I protect what's mine. Your brother and my wife forgot that. Don't make the same mistake. After Samuel left, Scott focused on his next move. His security team reported that Carrie had been seen near Josefina's school, attempting to make contact through other parents. Increase security, he ordered. And get me everything we have on Carrie's parents. Let's see how they react to learning their daughter planned a murder. Jack raised an eyebrow. Going for total destruction? They tried to take everything from me. Now I'm taking everything from them. How's the media campaign going? Every major newspaper has the story. Your PR team positioned it perfectly. Successful businessman targeted by gold-digging wife and corrupt lawyer. The public loves it. Scott's phone lit up with a text from Josefina. Dad, can we have pizza tonight? His expression softened momentarily as he replied. Despite everything, his daughter remained his priority. He'd hired the best child psychologist to help her process the trauma, and she was slowly healing. The intercom buzzed again. Mr. McConnell? Mrs. McConnell's parents are here. Scott straightened his tie. Time to reveal to them exactly who their daughter really was. Hours later, Scott stood in his home office, reviewing the day's victories. Carrie's parents had left broken, their illusions about their daughter shattered. Leroy faced criminal charges. His enemies were falling one by one. Kirsten entered with more files. The forensic accountants found something interesting. Seems Leroy was skimming money from other clients too. The Bar Association is reopening dozens of his old cases. Make sure his victims know who exposed him, Scott directed. I want everyone to understand the consequences of betraying me. You're destroying them completely, Kirsten observed. They tried to take my life, my daughter, my legacy. I'm not just destroying them, sister. I'm making sure they never recover. By the time I'm done, they'll wish I really had died in that plane crash. The house security system chimed. Josefina was home from her therapy session. Scott put away the files, compartmentalizing his rage. His revenge could wait. His daughter needed her father. But in the back of his mind, plans continued forming. His enemies had played their hand and lost. Now they would learn why Scott McConnell was feared in the business world. He hadn't built his empire by being merciful to those who crossed him. The storm wasn't gathering anymore. It had arrived. And Scott McConnell was the hurricane. Chapter 7. Justice Served. The courthouse buzzed with anticipation. After months of preparation, the trial of Leroy Flowers had begun. Scott sat in the front row beside Kirsten, watching his former friend squirm under the prosecutor's relentless questioning. Mr. Flowers, the prosecutor began, please explain to the court how you came to possess Mr. McConnell's forged signature on these adoption papers. Leroy tugged at his collar, his expensive suit no longer projecting the confidence it once did. I received them from Mrs. McConnell. I assumed they were legitimate. You assumed? The prosecutor held up a document. Yet we have evidence of you transferring funds to a known document forger 3 days before these papers were filed. Would you like to revise your statement? Leroy's attorney jumped up. Objection, Your Honor. Overruled, Judge Martinez declared. Answer the question, Mr. Flowers. Scott leaned toward Kirsten. He's crumbling faster than I expected. Wait for it, Kirsten whispered back. The financial evidence is next. The prosecutor approached with another stack of documents. Mr. Flowers, can you explain these transfers from McConnell Industries to various offshore accounts? Those were legitimate business transactions. Really? The prosecutor interrupted. Because we have testimony from Marcus Reed about your plans to use these accounts to funnel money after Mr. McConnell's planned disappearance, the courtroom erupted in murmurs. Scott watched as Leroy's face drained of color. Mr. Reed, the prosecutor continued, please tell the court about your meetings with Mr. Flowers and Mrs. McConnell. Marcus Reed, now wearing an orange jumpsuit, took the stand. They wanted it to look like an accident. Said they needed Mr. McConnell gone so the adoption could go through without questions. Mrs. McConnell said she'd pay double if it looked like he'd just disappeared. Leroy's attorney tried damage control, but the evidence was overwhelming. Bank records, forged documents, witness testimony. Scott had made sure everything was airtight. During a recess, Jack approached Scott. Carrie's waiting outside. She's demanding to speak with you. Perfect timing, Scott replied. Let's give her what she wants. In a private conference room, Carrie paced back and forth. Her designer clothes, once immaculate, now looked worn. Her makeup couldn't hide her exhaustion. Scott, please, she began as he entered. You have to stop this. We can work something out. Like you worked out plans for my murder? Scott's voice was ice. Or how you plan to send our daughter to Switzerland. That's not. I never meant. Save it. Scott placed a folder on the table. These are custody papers. Sign them. Carrie's eyes widened. You can't take Josefina from me. I'm her mother. A mother who told her child her father was dead. A mother who planned to ship her off to boarding school so she wouldn't interfere with your new life. Scott pushed the folder forward. Sign, or I'll make sure every detail of your murder plot becomes public record. Your parents, your friends, everyone will know exactly who you are. You're destroying my life. No, Carrie. You destroyed your own life when you decided to kill me and steal my daughter. Scott's expression remained neutral. The difference is, I'm giving you a choice. Sign the papers, walk away with some dignity and tact. Or don't, and I'll make sure you never see Josefina again anyway. From your prison cell. Carrie's hand trembled as she reached for the pin. You've changed, Scott. You used to be kind. I'm still kind, to those who deserve it. You taught me an expensive lesson about trust, Carrie. Now sign. After she signed, Scott stood. One more thing. The trust fund I set up for Josefina? It's now under my sole control. You won't be able to touch a penny. How am I supposed to live? That's not my concern anymore. Consider yourself lucky. You're getting off easier than Leroy. Back in the courtroom, the jury didn't take long to reach their verdict. Guilty on all counts: fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder, embezzlement. Judge Martinez's sentence was severe: 15 years without possibility of parole. Your Honor, Leroy pleaded, I have a family, a reputation. A reputation you destroyed. The judge interrupted. Mr. Flowers, you've brought shame to the legal profession and betrayed every oath you took as an attorney. The court strips you of your license to practice law, effective immediately and permanently. Scott watched as they led Leroy away in handcuffs. His brother Samuel sat in the back of the courtroom, head bowed. Outside, reporters swarmed around Scott. Mr. McConnell, how do you feel about the verdict? Justice was served, Scott replied simply. Let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks they can prey on families for profit. Later that evening, Scott sat in his study, reviewing the day's events with Kirsten and Jack. The DA's building a case against Carrie now, Kirsten reported. With Reed's testimony and the evidence we've gathered, she's looking at serious time. Good. Scott pulled out his phone, showing them a text from Josefina. Dad, did you win? What will you tell her? Jack asked. The truth. That people who try to hurt our family face consequences. Scott typed a reply. Yes, Princess. No one will ever try to take you away again. You've destroyed them completely, Kirsten observed. They tried to destroy me first. The difference is I succeeded. Scott stood, walking to his desk. Make sure the media has all the details about Leroy's other victims. I want his reputation completely annihilated. Already done, Jack confirmed. 5 other families have come forward with similar stories. His pattern of helping spouses steal assets and children. It's all going public. And Carrie's social circle? In shambles. The evidence of her murder plot leaked to her country club friends. She's been kicked out of every social organization in the city. Scott nodded, satisfied. He'd taken everything from them. Their money, their freedom, their reputations. Just as they'd planned to take everything from him. What about Samuel? Kirsten asked. Let him live with the knowledge that he could have stopped this years ago. His silence made him complicit. Scott's phone buzzed again. Excuse me, Josefina's waiting for dinner. As he drove home, Scott reflected on the journey from that day he'd returned from Tokyo. They'd thought him an easy mark, too focused on business to notice their schemes. They'd underestimated his capacity for ruthlessness when protecting what was his. Now they would spend years paying for that mistake. His revenge wasn't just complete, it was devastating. Chapter 8. The Aftermath. 6 months after Leroy's conviction, Scott sat in his home office reviewing the latest updates from Jack. Carrie's trial had ended with a 10-year sentence for conspiracy and attempted murder. Her appeals had been denied, thanks to Kirsten's meticulous preparation of the case. A knock at the door interrupted his reading. Come in. Josefina entered, holding a newspaper. At 11, she carried herself with more confidence now, the trauma of the past year healing under her father's protective care. Dad, my friends at school are talking about Mom's sentence. Is it true she tried to hurt you? Scott gestured for her to sit. No more lies, no matter how difficult the truth. Yes, Princess. Your mother and Leroy made some very bad choices. They wanted to take what was mine, including you. But why? Sometimes people get greedy. They want more than they have, and they're willing to hurt others to get it. He took the newspaper, setting it aside. But that's over now. They can't hurt us anymore. Are you sad about Mom? No, Scott answered honestly. I'm sad that you had to go through this. But I'm not sad about punishing people who tried to harm our family. The intercom buzzed. Mr. McConnell? Your parents are here. Scott smiled. Perfect timing. Ready for dinner with Grandma and Grandpa? Walter and Wilma Fry had become regular fixtures in their lives since the trial. Scott's relationship with his parents, once strained by his focus on business, had grown stronger through the ordeal. In the dining room, Walter raised his glass. To justice served. Dad, Scott said, noting Josephina's presence. Sorry, sweetheart. Walter turned to his granddaughter. To family? Josefina grinned. To family. Wilma squeezed Scott's hand. We're so proud of how you've handled everything, son. Especially with Josefina. Scott watched his daughter chatting animatedly with her grandfather about school. The private tutors and therapy sessions had helped her process the trauma. She was thriving now, protected by a father who'd shown the world what happened to those who threatened his family. After dinner, Kirsten arrived with news. The Bar Association's using Leroy's case to implement new ethics guidelines. They're calling it the McConnell Protocol, new rules for handling family law cases. Good, Scott nodded. How many of his former cases have been reopened? 17 so far. His victims are getting justice, thanks to you exposing his pattern. And Carrie's appeal? Denied, as expected. Her new lawyer tried arguing emotional distress, but the murder plot evidence was too strong. Kirsten sipped her wine. Her parents called me today. They want to see Josefina. Scott's expression hardened. No, they supported Carrie's lies about my death. They were going to attend that adoption ceremony. They don't get access to my daughter. I thought you'd say that. I already declined. Kirsten smiled. Firmly. The next morning, Scott took Josefina to the park, their weekend tradition now. As she played with other children, he received a text from Jack, Leroy's first parole hearing denied. He's not handling prison well. Good, Scott typed back. He'd made sure Leroy was sent to a maximum security facility, his white-collar crime status offering no protection among hardened criminals. Another message. Carrie's requesting another meeting. Denied, Scott replied. He'd kept his promise. She wouldn't see Josefina again except through court-approved supervisors. Watching his daughter laugh with her friends, Scott reflected on his transformation. The trusting businessman who'd left for Tokyo last year was gone. In his place stood a man who understood power, consequences, and the importance of protecting what mattered. His phone rang, a business call from Tokyo. The same deal that had saved his life by keeping him from that plane was now expanding. Success, as always, was the best revenge. Chapter 9. The New Beginning. 5 years later, Scott stood at the podium, addressing the crowd at the opening of the McConnell Foundation for Family Justice. When someone tries to destroy your family, they don't just attack your present, they try to steal your future. This foundation will ensure that no one succeeds in such attempts again. The audience, filled with business leaders, legal professionals, and families helped by the foundation, applauded. In the front row, 15-year-old Josefina beamed with pride. Beside her sat Kirsten, Jack, and Scott's parents, the loyal core who'd helped him rebuild. After the ceremony, a reporter approached. Mr. McConnell, some say your foundation's methods are aggressive in pursuing fraudulent spouses and corrupt lawyers. How do you respond? Scott smiled, but his eyes remained sharp. Justice shouldn't be gentle with predators. We're not here to give second chances to people who try to destroy families. We're here to stop them, permanently. The foundation had already helped 30 families recover stolen assets and protect their children from similar schemes. Scott had turned his experience into a weapon against others like Carrie and Leroy. Later that evening, in his office, Scott opened his bottom drawer. The original adoption papers lay there, and signed. A reminder of the day everything changed. He'd kept them as a trophy, proof that no one could take what was his. Josefina entered without knocking, the only person allowed that privilege. Dad, my college applications are ready for your review. Harvard still your first choice? Scott asked, closing the drawer. Yale. Actually, their law program looks better. She grinned. Think I could be as good a lawyer as Aunt Kirsten? Better. Scott stood, embracing his daughter. Ready for dinner? Jack and Kirsten are joining us. At the restaurant, Scott looked around the table at his real family, not the false one Carrie had tried to create, but the loyal core who'd stood with him through everything. Jack raised his glass. To the Foundation's success. To justice, Kirsten added. To family, Josefina said. Scott nodded, thinking of Leroy in his prison cell, of Carrie in her lonely confinement. They'd thought him weak, too focused on business to notice their schemes. Their mistake had cost them everything. To consequences, Scott said quietly, and they all understood. His phone buzzed. Another family needing the Foundation's help. Another chance to show the world what happened to those who tried to destroy what others had built. Scott McConnell had emerged from betrayal not just stronger, but more dangerous to his enemies. His new legacy would ensure that lesson echoed through generations. Cross him, and you lose everything. The ruthless businessman had become something more. A protector who showed no mercy to threats against family. His enemies had tried to write his ending. Instead, he'd written theirs. He looked at Josefina, discussing her college plans with Kirsten, and felt a deep satisfaction. They tried to steal his daughter, his money, his life. Now she would carry his true legacy, strength, justice, and the wisdom to destroy those who deserved destruction. The adoption papers in his desk would remain unsigned, a trophy of his victory. But his real triumph sat before him. A daughter protected, a family strengthened, and enemies who'd learned too late why crossing Scott McConnell was a fatal mistake. The end wasn't about redemption. It was about power. The power to protect what mattered and punish those who threatened it. Scott had learned that lesson well, and so had everyone else. Epilogue. 10 years later. The McConnell Foundation's annual gala buzzed with New York's elite. At 25, Josefina McConnell commanded attention at the podium, her presence reminiscent of her father's power. 10 years ago, my father showed me what justice truly means, she addressed the crowd. Today, the McConnell Foundation has helped over 300 families recover from fraud and betrayal. We've expanded to 15 countries, and our legal team has a 100% success rate in prosecuting family fraud cases. Scott McConnell watched from his seat, pride evident in his expression. At 60, he remained a formidable figure in both business and philanthropy. McConnell Industries had tripled in size, absorbing several competitors and expanding globally. His reputation for ruthless efficiency in business was matched only by his dedication to destroying those who preyed on families. Kirsten Daniel, now a senior partner at her own law firm, sat beside her brother. Her practice specialized in family fraud cases, working closely with the foundation. She'd pioneered new legal strategies for prosecuting complex financial crimes, and her methods were taught in law schools nationwide. The foundation's latest initiative, Josefina continued, focuses on preventing fraud before it happens. Our AI system, developed with cutting-edge technology, flags suspicious patterns in financial transactions and legal filings. We're not just fighting fraud. We're stopping it before it starts. In the audience, Jack Hayden smiled. His security firm, now the largest in the country, had helped develop that AI system. He'd turned his experience from Scott's case into a revolutionary approach to fraud detection, combining financial tracking with behavioral analysis. After the speech, Scott joined his daughter backstage. Harvard Law is lucky to have you teaching next semester, he said, embracing her. Only part-time, Dad. The foundation still comes first. Josefina checked her phone. Aunt Kirsten's team just won another case. Remember Thomas Reynolds? Leroy's former associate? He tried the same scheme with another family. We caught it within weeks. He's facing 20 years. Scott nodded, satisfied. They dismantled not just Leroy's operation, but his entire network. The message had been clear. Target families, and the McConnells would destroy you. At the reception, Walter and Wilma Fry, now in their 80s, held court with their usual grace. Walter's military background had proved invaluable in organizing the foundation's international operations, while Wilma's social connections helped identify families needing assistance. Any word about Carrie? Wilma asked quietly when Scott joined them. Still in prison, Scott replied. Her latest parole request was denied last month. The board remembered our recommendation. Carrie's fall had been total. After serving her initial sentence, evidence from other crimes had surfaced, extending her imprisonment. She'd lost all contact with her family, her former social circle, everything she'd valued. And Leroy? Walter inquired. Dead, Jack interjected, joining their conversation. Heart attack in prison last year. His cellmate said he spent his final years writing appeals that were never filed. The guards found a photo of Scott in his cell. He'd become obsessed with his downfall. Samuel Flowers had retired from the bench shortly after his brother's conviction, his reputation tainted by association. He'd moved to Arizona, where he lived in obscurity, his judicial legacy overshadowed by his brother's crimes. Later that evening, Scott hosted a smaller gathering at his penthouse. Josephina's fiancé, David Chun, a prosecutor she'd met through the foundation, discussed their latest case with Kirsten while Jack and his wife caught up with the phrase. Dad, Josefina pulled Scott aside. There's something you should know. David and I aren't just planning the wedding. We're planning to expand the foundation's work. We want to create a special task force, combining legal expertise with investigative skills. Like what you, Aunt Kirsten, and Uncle Jack did, but on a global scale. Scott studied his daughter. She'd inherited his business acumen and added her own fierce sense of justice. The scared little girl from that day in her bedroom had grown into a warrior in her own right. You'll need resources, he said. Already arranged. The AI system's profits alone could fund it. But we want to do this right. Make it impossible for anyone to ever attempt what Mom and Leroy did. Scott's phone buzzed, a secure message from one of his sources. Another lawyer, inspired by Leroy's schemes, had just been caught attempting a similar fraud. The foundation's response would be swift and decisive. You know, Scott said to his daughter, your mother and Leroy thought they could take everything from us. Instead, they gave us a mission. Josefina nodded. They thought you were just a businessman who could be fooled. They never understood what you'd become when they threatened your family. At his desk later that night, Scott reviewed the foundation's latest statistics. Their work had recovered billions in stolen assets, prevented countless frauds, and put hundreds of predatory lawyers and spouses in prison. Each case sent the same message: mess with families, and the consequences would be severe. The original adoption papers remained in his drawer, now sealed in a glass case, a reminder of where it all began. But Scott's true legacy lived in the foundation's work, in Josefina's dedication to justice, and in the fear their name instilled in would-be fraudsters worldwide. The next morning's newspaper carried a story about Carrie. She'd been denied permission to attend her mother's funeral, her request for temporary release rejected based on the foundation's recommendation. Her isolation was complete, her world reduced to a cell and regrets. Scott read the article without emotion. He'd long since moved past anger or satisfaction regarding Carrie. She'd become irrelevant, a cautionary tale told to warn others about the price of betrayal. At the foundation's offices, Josefina led a meeting with international representatives. The McConnell Protocol, now adopted by law firms worldwide, had revolutionized family law practice. Firms had to prove their compliance annually or face exclusion from major legal networks. The foundation isn't just about punishment, Josefina explained to a new team member. It's about prevention. We make the cost of betrayal so high that most people don't dare attempt it. Scott watched from his office as his daughter commanded the room. She'd taken his lessons about power and justice and built something even greater. The scared little girl clutching adoption papers had become a force for justice in her own right. The McConnell name, once associated purely with business success, now carried a different weight. It meant protection for the vulnerable and destruction for those who preyed on families. Scott had turned his revenge into a legacy that would outlive him. As he prepared for another board meeting, Scott reflected on the decade since his return from Tokyo. He'd learned that true power wasn't just in wealth or business success. It was in the ability to protect what mattered and destroy those who threatened it. The world had changed, but the lesson remained the same. Cross Scott McConnell or his family, and you lose everything. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was justice, served cold and complete, generation after generation. The empire he'd built would ensure that lesson never faded. And in Josefina, he'd found not just a daughter, but an heir who understood that protecting family sometimes meant destroying its enemies. The adoption papers in his drawer had started it all. But the real story was what they'd built from that betrayal, a legacy of power, protection, and consequence that would echo through time. Scott McConnell had turned personal revenge into a global mission. And the world was better for it, at least for those who played by the rules. For those who didn't, well, they learned the hard way why some names should be feared. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.